I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an executive. I wanted to follow in his footsteps, very similar to my dad. And he said, you have to leave. And I was kind of surprised by that. I always thought you start at the bottom and work your way up. And he said, this is a huge organization. It's going to take you too long to do that. Leave. Go start a company.
1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, guys, welcome to the Ground Up Podcast. Today, we're excited to have Michael Colonnese. Michael is the CEO of SV Academy. He's going to tell us all about what he currently does, but before we get there, as you know, we want to start kind of at the foundation in that sense. So, Michael, just to get things started where we always start is, tell me, who were you as a kid? So, elementary school, what were your hobbies? What did you like? What did you not like? Who were you?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, just north of the city in a town called Marietta. Went to high school in the city itself, to a private school there. But I grew up playing sports. I mean, that was my big thing. That's where my family bonded, my friends bonded. I played pretty much every sport under the sun up until probably around ninth grade or so. And I had a tough conversation with my tennis coach that said, you started too late, you'll never be able to play in college, so you either buckle down now and figure it out, or this is going to be the end of it. So I doubled down, went all in on tennis, and that was my big sport. So for me, I'm a very social person, grew up hanging out with friends all the time, but I would play tennis before school, after school, go out late at night, use my dad's car to light up the courts because we didn't have lights, and go out and practice my serve. So that's how, towards the end of my high school career, started to get some of the college letters in, and really I'm super competitive. So knowing I started late, I just had to work a lot harder than everybody else. But yeah.
It's so interesting you say that. So just to give you a little background on me, Michael, I play tennis periodically, but I've never been a tennis guy. But I've got a 4-year-old daughter, and I've got a 10-month-old son. And my wife and I, a lot of what we talk about is, what if we could kind of create that path for our daughter, what would it look like? And we both come to the conclusion that if we could pick a sport for her to play coming through school, that tennis would likely be the sport for her to play. So we've already gotten her a racket and started to try to do the Serena Williams version of it. I'm not that serious, but that's absolutely a big part of our vision for our daughter. Obviously, it never goes the way you planned. So you chose tennis because that's what you were best at, or that's what you had the biggest passion for?
I had a passion for it. It's funny, growing up, the sport I was best at was actually soccer. And the first time I ever played tennis, picked up a racket, I went to a summer camp, and I did really well. And I think that was super encouraging to me to want to do more. But I'm one of those types of people, when I get obsessed with something, I'm all in all the time. And that's all I could think about. So for me, playing tennis, I was constantly watching players play. I'd go show up early to my training camps. I would play with the camps before mine. I'd play with them afterwards. You know, knock on wood, we end up having a lot of professionals that went through our camp. Robbie Ginepri, who went to the semifinals, I think in 2003, trained under the same coach as me. So I would show up early, and if I was the only one there, I got to return his serves. And so that kind of reinforcement really got me to say, hey, this is where I want to be and what I want to do. But I very much, whatever it is that I find in life that I get obsessed with, I can't stop learning about it. So to me, it's just, it makes me thrive, kind of push me to the next level. But it's how I got to where I've been today.
It's funny you say that. I was having a conversation with my mom the other day about myself as a child, and I was a kid that was always probably considered by my peers one of the more intelligent kids in the class, but my grades did not reflect the level of intellect. And for me, it's always been, if I was interested in it, man, I dove right into it. I leaned into it. I excelled in it. And if I was not interested, you could not bother me with trying to act like I cared about it. It's funny now as a grown-up, I'm very interested in history. But man, in middle school and high school, if you tried to tell me something happened a week ago, I couldn't care less. It was in the past. How does that help me? And it's such a different perspective.
Can I ask you this question, Michael? I want you. This is a little bit jumping into the entrepreneur side, but I wanted to ask you the competitiveness and the obsession that you have within sports like that. How does that translate to running a business? In which
It's the same exact thing. It's really about trying to identify our problems. You know, growing up, my dad was a serial CFO of biotech and pharmaceutical companies. One of those kinds of guys who started at the bottom, rose all the way to the top, and was very much, you know, if you want to lead and you want to progress in your career, it's become an expert at something. And so for me, it was very instilled in me at an early stage. That's what you have to do. So in my career now, in order for me to progress, the way I see it is find something that you really, really are passionate about, but also something that you're really good at. And for me, it tends to be identifying problems that other people don't see. I read a book probably about a decade and a half ago. It was actually written by Admiral McRaven, who's a former Navy SEAL. He was the commander of SEAL Team 6 when they went in and got bin Laden. And way back in the day, he wrote a book when he was at SEAL Team 3, and it was called Special Operations. And the whole book was actually about how you hit targets and what made them successful and which ones failed. And so he would go back and forth between a highly successful one in history, from World War I to World War II, Vietnam, you name it, and talk about the moment where something was successful and where it failed. And for me, I found that so fascinating because it was in a world totally different than entrepreneurship, but there were a lot of the same applicable learnings. And so what I would try and do is when I look at a problem now, I try and see everything in a very similar way in terms of, okay, where do we hit that precipice where things just J-curve up? And taking those different types of learnings, I was able to go from one industry to another and really make it work there. So that's how I approach problems. And I think, I, not to toot my own horn, but it tends to be a kind of unique way of approaching problem solving by seeing what worked in different industries and in completely different worlds altogether and bringing it into a world that hasn't seen that type of progress before.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, going back to the childhood, at what point in your youth did you identify as an entrepreneur? Or maybe you didn't at that point. Maybe in school you were going to go down the traditional college, get a job, get a career, be a CFO, a type of path. When did that divert? How old were you when you kind of identify with that path?
Yeah, I always wanted to follow my dad. He was my hero, still is to this day. Everything that he did was gold to me. So my mission was to study finance the way he did, start from the bottom and work my way up. And I went to college, University of Tennessee. I was a finance major there. My senior year, I went into the career services arm and said, I want to go into investment banking. And they said, we're not a feeder school for that. Pick another profession. And I was so blown away by that I had spent 4 years at this institution learning, spending money on tuition, and they're trying to tell me, nope, do something else. That's not what we do. And that stayed with me through my entire career. It's probably why I'm in the higher education space today. So for me, I got a job as a financial consultant doing pre-sales for a very large tech company based out of Atlanta. And me being one of those kind of ultra ambitious, I was in a training program. I became the president of the training program, and I used that to network with a lot of the executives. And one of the guys who I got pretty close with, who I saw as a mentor, was, at the time, he was the senior vice president of M&A, who he went on to be the CFO. He is now the current CEO of a company called Infor, Kevin Samuelson. And I think it was our second time we sat down together, and I told him what I wanted to do. I wanted to be an executive. I wanted to follow in his footsteps, very similar to my dad. And he said, you have to leave. And I was kind of surprised by that. I always thought you start at the bottom and work your way up. And he said, this is a huge organization. It's going to take you too long to do that. Leave. Go start a company. And I listened to that, and I got very intimidated by that. And I ended up taking a job as the COO of a lobbying firm in DC. And I was 2.5 years out of college, very inexperienced, but the title intrigued me. I thought the responsibilities, and I was obviously the youngest person for the job, but I got the job. And so I moved to DC, took that position, and learned very quickly that I probably, A, wasn't that qualified for it, and B, I wasn't that interested in politics. And when you start to see behind the curtain of how things work, it really opened my eyes that this is not the world for me. So I ended up clashing quite a bit with the CEO. I was, quote unquote, the chief operating officer at the ripe age of 25, but I was basically being treated like an office manager, and my ego got in the way, and we ended up clashing, and ultimately it just wasn't a good fit. And that's really where the entrepreneurship side of the equation jumped in. One of my biggest mentors to this day, his name is Sean Glass. He was running an accelerator, a startup accelerator at the time, and we had mutual connections, and he said, come on out, see some of the startups and see if any of them tickle your fancy. And ended up meeting my co-founder there for my first company, and it was in the education space, and it was something that just really spoke to me. I am in Miami, so I won't get the brunt of it. Sorry, Tampa. I really feel for you guys right now. Hopefully everybody's getting out of there, but it's starting to hit the whole state now.
Yeah, I was listening to some information on that today. Like the governor even said, get out, and if you stay, you will die. Yeah. Like that pointed, like leave, and if you stay, you will die. I was like, she's like, I've never made a statement that aggressive. I'm from this area. I've never stated it this way. I've grown up in hurricanes. This is likely the worst we've ever seen in this area.
Yeah, I feel like if people in Florida are scared of something, you gotta be scared of it too. You gotta go.
Yes,
Florida has some crazy stuff.
I've got my wife out right now getting supplies, so it's we're doing a little bit of prep. I really don't think it'll be too bad over here in Miami, but Tampa is going to be in some big trouble.
Yeah, I hope everyone stays safe out there. I hope everyone got out if they could. And jumping back into what you were saying here before, you talked a lot about mentors that you had throughout your careers in your life, and how you looked at that. Can you give us a little bit of background on how, one, you approach people for them to become your mentors in the first place? I think a lot of people are scared to do that and don't know how to do that. So can you talk about how you approached it and how those mentors, I mean, obviously you talked a little about how they shaped your career, but how much of how effective a mentor has on your life and your projection in your life?
Huge. I'd say a lot of what I do is based on having conversations with people who are smarter than me. The way I always approach it, so I will refer to them as mentors. If you ask them, I don't think that they would say, oh, that's a mentee of mine. They might at this point, but the way I approach it is I never ask them. It's nothing formal. It's not like, are we dating yet? The way I approach it is I just ask them a lot of questions. and it gets to a point where we build a relationship from me asking questions about them, what's happening in their life, how do they make decisions. And ultimately, I'm a firm believer in giving back. So if I can add value to your life in any way, shape, or form, that's crucial to building a relationship. So a lot of times in those conversations, it'll just be identifying, hey, what's a pain point for you today, and see what I can do to kind of alleviate that and help. And then it just becomes a mutual relationship.
Now, based off of that, can I ask you another question here about the confidence to go up and just ask people who are, who you think are smarter than you or more successful than you, and go like that. So I have 3 boys. My oldest one is 4. And so I want to instill the confidence in them as they grow up to be able to have this conversation and look at people as, as somebody who could help them and to go fearlessly towards that. And so I want to know, like, in your childhood here, like, what do you think helped you to be that way to, just fearlessly go up to people? Do you think anything in particular helped you to go that route? Or somebody in particular, your dad, I know you talked about, or like in general, how do people feel confident when doing that?
Yeah, absolutely brilliant question here, because this is where my mom and my oldest sister Lori come into play. Because my dad was the professional, incredibly intelligent. His nickname at work was Rain Man. He's one of those types of guys who can look at a balance sheet and tell you where the issue is just by looking at the numbers. Incredibly intelligent. My mom and my oldest sister are the most social human beings you will ever meet. Going out to even grocery stores, at the checkout counters, they would strike up conversations with anybody who was there, and they've always been that way. And I was more like my dad, very quiet, very reserved. I was very social with my friends and outgoing with them, but it took me a moment to warm up to people. And I had a moment in college, and I think I was a sophomore. I can remember distinctly the first time I ever practiced it. I was at Publix, and I just remember thinking, the way my mom and the way my sister can build relationships with anybody, where they walk into a Starbucks and the people behind the counter know them by name and start making their orders immediately. They've always been this way. And so I said, I think that that's an incredibly useful ability to have. And so I just started practicing, and that's how it's super difficult. I remember going into Publix, I had headphones in, and I'm going to check out. And I remember I was the only person in there. Nobody had any of the lines. And I walked back and forth for maybe 5 minutes trying to build myself up to say, just talk to the person behind the counter. I took the headphones out and just asked them how their day was. I'm literally choking on my own words, trying to get a conversation going. And you just have to force yourself to do it. And I think it helps when you have somebody to see them doing it over and over and over again, and just leveraging that. So I had great, again, mentors, my sister Lori and my mom, who really showed me how to do it. I never explicitly asked them how to do it or what they do, but just observing and putting that to practice.
That's awesome. Yeah, I was talking to Matt about this the other day. Actually, it reminds me of something that we talked about, where Tim Ferriss, he talks about being comfortable in uncomfortable situations, and one of the things he says to do is to go up and ask for a 10% discount everywhere you go. Like, to look somebody straight in the face and say, can I get 10% off? And it's so uncomfortable because you just, like, they're like, why? And like, you have no answer. You just like, can I get 10% off? And if you get more comfortable than they are with that, then a lot of times you just get it. They're just like, sure. Like, the audacity of somebody asking that, sure, here you go. And like, it's just something that he practices over and over again. So I think that's awesome.
First of all, I love that saying. It's so about, probably around 2014 or so, my first company was actually going through an acquisition, and long story short, the term sheet got pulled. We ended up not getting acquired. But during that time, I was trying to think about what I wanted to do next in life. And one of those kind of side project passions of mine was actually becoming a Navy SEAL. And I had friends from college. I had friends that were currently in the teams that were coaching me and advising me. And I went down that path really hardcore. And that saying, get uncomfortable being uncomfortable, actually comes from the SEAL teams. And so I got very, very used to saying, hey, listen, whatever makes me uncomfortable, that's what I'm going to go towards. And so now, anytime I'm in what I feel is an uncomfortable situation, I get like excited from it now, because I've done it so many times now where it's throw myself in that awkward situation, I'll make it work.
That's awesome.
So earlier you talked a little bit about the value of a mentorship. And as you were talking about that, one of the things that came through my mind, which was, one of the first jobs I had in sales, I used to sell DirecTV and Sam's Clubs and Best Buys. And one of the things that was one of the most valuable lessons I learned is the art of giving back. So when I was new at that job, I was calling all these people who were at the top of the leaderboard, calling them saying, what are you doing? These guys or girls were people that were across the country that didn't know me, would never know me, would never meet me, owed me nothing. But because at some point somebody did that for them when they first started, they were willing to spend hours talking to me. And very quickly, fortunately, I moved up those leader ranks myself. And very quickly, I was the guy at those top of those boards, fielding those random calls from the brand new people. But it was always something instilled within us through that company is to give back. So I hear about all the value that you've received from some of the mentors. I also think about how we know each other. And how we know each other is randomly about a year and a half ago, I just blindly send you a message and asked for a meeting, and you said, here's my calendar. You didn't know me. You didn't know me anything. We had never crossed paths. We had a couple of connections in common, but I remember that day you jumped on the phone with me. I think we talked for 30, 45 minutes. You just shared with me what you do. You got to know a little bit about me, and that was it. And we didn't help each other. We didn't benefit from that call like directly, but you jumped on the phone and had that conversation. So talk with me a little bit now that you've made it to the point where I'm sure a lot of people would like to know from you what you did to get there. And now you're in a position where you're a mentor. How has that kind of tables turned? And what are your thoughts around now being the mentor instead of just the mentee?
Yeah. I mean, really, it kind of going back to my mom on this, she always said her biggest regret would be as if her children ever regretted anything. So she really instilled on us taking risks, taking opportunities, and jumping all over them. And I took that to heart. If something pops up that I think is an interesting opportunity, I mean, a few years ago, I was down in Brazil and I met some guys that had the largest producers of acai in the world. And I said, I want to help you guys. I love acai. It was just blowing up in the United States. These guys were the largest producers, and yet they were a family-run business. And so I jumped all over that just to help and support them. And this is how I kind of approach everything there. And really what it comes down to is the whole mentorship. It's crucial. It is crucial to not just your career, but life in general. Trying to identify what do you want to do in life in terms of building a family, getting an education, building your career, anything. There's always mentors to be had there. So I see it now in my role, especially here at SV Academy, where our entire concept is built around mentorship, is trying to give back. So I try to be very good. I apologize to anybody who does reach out to me and I don't do a good job about responding, but I try to be as good as I can about responding to any messages. And at the very least, if I can't help you, giving you support on like, hey, here's a better way to do your outbound messaging, or here's a better way to approach people. But trying to get those responses in and be supportive in that role as what now I guess I'd be considered a mentor in some of my relationships now.
So let's stay here on SV. Just for the people that are watching, or even us, explain to us, give us the quick high-level elevator pitch of what is SV Academy. What do you guys do?
Yeah. So SV Academy is trying to redefine how education works. From a higher education point of view, we see two major problems. One is student debt. People are spending an insane amount of money to get an education. That leads to problem number two, which is career outcomes. People are graduating and not getting jobs. So after spending an insane amount of money and time to get an education and you don't get a job out of that, it's really not benefiting the market as a whole. So what we're doing now is we have a 100-day long program to help you break into tech sales or customer success. And the way it works is we pay you. So we will pay you $7,500 to go through a 100-day program. We match you with an employer prior to even getting into the program, so you know you have a job waiting for you. And we give you the educational piece, and we assign you a mentor that you meet with to ensure you actually succeed in the role. So the goal here is to make sure that we are doing what I call the advanced step of an internship or an apprenticeship. We call it a residency. So just like in the medical space, by the time you show up to a hospital, you're a full-blown doctor. You've had all the education and licensing, but there's ongoing mentorship. So what we do is we support companies that are looking to hire pre-trained talent without adding a dime to their budget. So they tell us what they are looking for out of an ideal hire. We will source, screen, pre-train, and support during the onboarding period for SDRs, BDRs, customer success reps, you name it. And coming shortly, we're going to be doing an upskilling program to help you go from an SDR to an account executive or to a manager. So really want to make sure that this is a lifelong learning coupled with mentorship.
So as I hear you talk through this, and you and I have already had this conversation briefly, as you say, we pay people to go to school, to go through this 100-day thing, and then at the end, we provide staffing and sourcing of those people to companies without increasing the bottom line. I would imagine as you make this pitch to companies or to candidates, the question probably that follows is, what's the catch?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. We get asked that all the time. And especially because we get lumped into two categories. The traditional boot camp that traditionally, look, if you're charging students tuition, your customer is the student, which means as long as they're willing and able to pay, you'll accept anybody into the program. And unfortunately, over time, that dilutes the quality of the candidates, and employers don't end up hiring those. So from an employer's perspective, that's why we always start with the employer. For the first 90 days of the residency, they're just reallocating their budget. So essentially, rather than paying a random person you hire off a job board, having to do all the internal training and support yourself, and hoping that they work out, where according to Gartner, 33% of turnover happens in that first 90 days, we say take that exact same budget and send it over to SV Academy. We will pass through a portion of that to the resident while they're earning their full-time position, and we just net the difference there. And at the end of 90 days, flip them over to your payroll. We charge no recruiting fees whatsoever. So it's a way where employers can hire fully pre-sourced and pre-trained talent and support during onboarding without adding a dime to their budget.
Now talk to me about how you guys came up with that model, because that's awesome. So tell me, what was the thought process behind that? I mean, obviously, education is super expensive, and that's one of the big reasons why you went to that. But two, how did you come up with that model in order to build a business off this?
Yeah, so this was 14 years in the making. So my first company was called Work America. We connected talent from community and technical colleges into jobs. And the entire thesis behind that was bringing the German apprenticeship model over to the US. In theory, everybody loved it. You're seeing apprenticeships all across the country are starting to spike. Companies are being a little bit more open to it, but it still costs a lot of money to use a third-party provider for that. There's a fee to that. And so what we found is as we began to scale, we had to find a way where we didn't cost anything to the employer. And so over iteration, years of me being in this higher education space, speaking with recruiters on a day-to-day basis, ultimately, I saw a model called Hire, Train, Deploy. This was made famous by a venture capitalist named Ryan Craig from University Ventures. He's now Achieve Partners. And I built a relationship with him over the years. I saw this model. I saw how it worked in software engineering and consulting. And I said, I think I can take this, modify it, make it even better, and bring it to sales and customer success. So I've been doing this now for about 5 years. I was at a boot camp prior to SV Academy where we really pioneered this model, had tremendous success with earlier stage businesses, and now at SV Academy, much larger organization, we're taking this to the enterprise now. So you could be a small startup with 2 founders trying to hire your first salesperson ever, or you could be a major publicly traded company that's consistently trying to hire. We not only make it easier and cheaper for you to hire, but also our main mission is serving underrepresented talent. So really helping you diversify your pool of talent and who gets into these types of roles.
So you mentioned that one of the disadvantages, and I completely agree with you, with those boot camp style things where the student becomes your client, that also you said has it to where when they become your talent, then you dilute your overall talent. So what do you look for when you're trying to bring somebody in to become a student of SV Academy and a potential former employee that you will staff out? What are the things that you look for? What are the profile you are targeting? Are there any type of tests or filtration systems that has somebody actually be the right, perfect fit for you guys?
Yeah, great question. And this is really how you solve the skills gap issue. So that big gap between education and employment, start with the employer. Let them tell you what they're looking for. So every employer has something a little bit unique of what they want. Some people say, we want people with life experience. We want former teachers, military, retail, hospitality, fitness instructors, people that know how to work within a work environment, working with a manager, working in a team, and then train them specifically for your type of role. Some other companies say, listen, we want to grow them internally. We want them fresh, green, right out of college, maybe even no college at all, young and hungry. And so we always start with the employer, identify what they're looking for. We take that description and match it to all the people that are applying to our boot camp. We then run them through a few rounds of interviews to identify who we think would be perfect for each organization specifically. And then they get to do the final sign off. They still get to interview. They still get to say, yeah, we love this person and they have the potential to succeed. Go train them. And then we run them through our training program, and then we onboard them for the next 90 days as a resident.
It's very interesting how you can come to this conclusion, and I'll share with you here in a second. But I have one last question in regards to the companies. So if I'm a company and I've got staffing needs, is there an ideal company that should come to you, or is there a wide base of companies who need any type of help in any type of sales role or any type of SDR role? What is the profile of a company that should say, let me reach out to SV, let me reach out to Michael to see if he can solve my problems?
Yeah, so traditionally we worked in the tech space, working with companies that were hiring tech SDRs and BDRs and customer success reps. Look, every company's hiring sales. So what we want to do is be able to offer as many options as possible to anybody who wants to break into these types of roles. So ultimately, we want to go horizontal, not just tech. We want to go work with the major banks that are out there, insurance, healthcare, medical sales, all of these different types of roles. We will work with any company under the sun. We will teach you some best practices in terms of hiring, sourcing, recruiting, onboarding, teach different tech stacks that are available today. So we try and come with some value add before we even start our relationship with you. But ultimately, we're driven by the need to help as many students as possible. And if somebody says, I want to get into medical sales instead of tech sales, yeah, I'm going to go build the relationships with those medical suppliers to say, we've got people that are wanting to get into this space. Let us train them to get them in for you. So any company in any sector, and frankly, any size, small startup companies, they may not have recruiters or enablement teams to really source and onboard properly. Maybe first-time hiring managers that actually have to do it all themselves. We're very supplemental. Larger ERP companies that we work with, they've got recruiting teams, enablement teams, and experienced managers. We act more as mentors for their candidates. So we can dial it up or dial it down based on what the employer needs are, but we can work with any company under the sun.
Perfect. What do you want your legacy to be?
Honestly, I don't care too much. As long as I really feel like I'm changing the way things are done in terms of higher education, that's more than enough for me. Whether I get remembered doing that or SV Academy, it doesn't really matter to me.
Awesome. So let me ask you this last question. How can somebody, whether they're a company or want to be a student of SV Academy, how can they get in contact with you? What's the best way?
Yeah, so my DMs are always open. Add me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message. I'm extremely active there. My email is mike@sv.academy. Go to our website. We've got a form you can fill out. We'll have somebody contact you with under 12 hours. Any way, shape, or form, we're here.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate your time today, man. Thanks for jumping on the Ground Up podcast. And everybody who's watching, reach out to Michael if you need him help.
Guys, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Michael.